Going to go ahead and call this Monday, August 16th, 2021 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We are in hybrid mode, so we do have some folks that are calling in via WebEx remotely this evening. I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Phil, would you please lead us tonight? Thank you, Phil. We'll move on to communications from the public. We do have several public hearings advertised this evening, largely related to our fiscal year budget adoption. So if you're here to speak to the budget and the resolutions, please wait until I hold that public hearing. But if there's anything else you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity. And just for the record, your name and address, please, when you approach the podium. Any public comment tonight? Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'll go first. Nathan Dugan, I live at 937 Kalispell Avenue, and I'm here to just talk on affordable housing, more specifically on accessory apartments or accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs. I've sent a couple communications to you, but I'm finally able to show up, so I wanted to come talk. I appreciate the city's openness to revising its current ADU code, as it has fatal flaws that prevent significant ADU construction in Whitefish. Now, ADUs aren't going to solve all of our issues by themselves, but I do not believe that we can solve our housing issues without an ADU code that follows established best practices and avoids the pitfalls that befall nearly every municipality in this country, which prevents the construction of ADUs in numbers that have a meaningful impact on the rental housing availability. ADUs are important as they not only supply 1 and 2 bedroom housing, which is typically in short supply, but they have proven to be an effective, unregulated form of affordable rental housing. A significant portion of ADUs throughout the country are rented below market rates for various reasons. There should be a letter appended to your packets with more detailed information that I'm going to share here, as well as a 20-page document that I created summarizing the book, Backdoor Revolution, the definitive guide to ADU development, and a model code that the city can use as a blueprint. Basically, there are a few items that we definitely want to make sure that the new code that Whitefish is creating does not contain. There are 3 poison pills to avoid an ADU legislation. Any of these on their own will effectively kill ADU development. The current ADUs in Whitefish, or the current ADU rules in Whitefish, happen to contain all 3 of these poison pills, and this is a big reason that Whitefish has seen little ADU construction to date. These poison pills are owner occupancy requirements, off-street parking requirements, and conditional use or a conditional review process. We need to eliminate these provisions within our code, as they have proven to significantly stifle ADU development throughout the country, including right here in Whitefish. We also need to make sure that we avoid making the code too onerous, as we're on the verge of doing, as this too has proven to stifle ADU development. Now, why do you think that is? ADUs are typically developed by homeowners who are amateurs in the development and construction worlds. They aren't familiar with the development process in terms of interacting with the city, and development fees may introduce too much upfront expense or too much risk, especially when the development process is subject to failure for reasons outside of the homeowner's control, due specifically to the way that the code is written. Getting a permit to construct a new fence on my property was incredibly easy, and I believe it should be just as easy and straightforward to construct an ADU. I'm 100% for mandating that housing be affordable. Unfortunately, the state of Montana has taken much of our power away to do that, and in the case of ADUs, this has proven ineffective in other municipalities. Deed restrictions and tenant income screenings are obstacles for mom and pop landlords and can have a negative impact on the financeability of projects. To date, there have not been any successful attempts to institutionally scale ADUs through public-private partnerships. Tethering ADUs to affordable or senior housing programs has not worked in other municipalities. Think of it this way: if an ADU has more restrictions than the house that it sits behind in terms of its development or use, then ADUs will not be built. It is explicitly when governments have liberalized their regulatory stranglehold over the development or management of them that ADUs have been developed at a meaningful scale in municipalities. I think it's imperative that we get this right so we don't have to do it again a year down the line, and more importantly, so you all aren't wasting your precious time now by implementing another code that is ineffective as the current code is. Thanks for your time. I'm sure I'll talk to you in the future.
Thanks very much, and appreciate your email and the attachment. Who's next? Any further comment? Go ahead. Yeah, please. Yes.
Public comment,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Nancy Schuber, and my address is 110 Bay Point Drive. I am one of the many concerned citizens that would like council to take action to discontinue the TPA. These are some of the other people. Council created the Whitefish
Can you just please speak into the microphone just for the record, please?
Visitor Bureau in 2006. In 2007, the WCVB enacted the 1% TPA fee. It stands for Tourism Promotion Assessment. Its purpose was, and I quote, to improve business in Whitefish during the shoulder and winter seasons, maintain a strong summer season, end quote. They say they have not marketed summer in a decade, yet we were mentioned on Good Morning America in early summer. The purpose of the TPA is no longer valid. One of the most compelling reasons to end this fee is the fact that businesses are short-staffed and must close at critical times. This does not leave a favorable impression with our visitors. The city does not collect or spend the money, but they do approve the yearly budget of almost $800,000. Without council, they have no oversight. They could raise it to 3%. It could go on forever because it's optional. Most residents are surprised, then angry, to find out that they have been paying for tourism promotion. This is my friend Beverly. She's going to have some handouts for you. One restaurant worker told me the TPA pays for the flowers downtown. Another longtime restaurant resident told me they think it pays for the sewage treatment plant. The receipts that you're seeing on this handout do not show that it's optional, nor do they explain what TPA stands for on the receipt. Explore Whitefish, the vehicle of the WCVB, extols the virtues of sustainable tourism. Most of our community feels that we have surpassed the sustainable level. This is a restaurant handout stating that the 1% fee helps to maintain the quality of life for local residents. That's the big one and the little one, kind of greenish. That's a restaurant handout. It helps to maintain the quality of life for local residents. Let's see, how does it improve the quality of our lives? Does it fill the grocery store shelves? Does it get you a tea time? Does it get you a table at a restaurant? Maybe if you own a B&B, it improves the quality of your life, but for the other 99% of us, it doesn't. We urge council to review the need for the TPA and take action. Here are two options for further consideration. Place a one-year moratorium on the collection and spending of the TPA, review it a year out, and if reinstated, remove restaurants from the TPA, allowing residents an out from funding tourism promotion. It would still be on bed tax, it would still be on rental cars. Option two, this is a good one, and most of the people that we've talked to all sign this. They've agreed that this is the best idea yet. City Council has a unique opportunity to help businesses and residents alike with option two by discontinuing the TPA and replacing it with an optional 1% affordable housing fee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Further comments from the public? We'll move on to volunteer.
John, it's
Brian.
Michelle. Oh,
Michelle, is there
we also
someone
have
online?
somebody
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian, and then we'll
Thanks, Michelle.
go online.
I am Brian Schott, 708 Lupfer Avenue. Thanks for your service, council and mayor. I'm going to respond directly to Ms. Schuber's comments here. I have been involved with telling the story of Whitefish since 1998 when I worked at Big Mountain. Moved through with the Whitefish Partners program, the WCVB, most recently vice chair of the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. And there needs to be continued education about what tourism promotion means in Whitefish, because it's not on the surface what it means. There's been a tremendous shift in the media landscape. I'm specifically involved with public relations and media relations, so I deal with the media requests like Good Morning America, which is a great example to bring up. Good Morning America approached us in the spring, and we essentially told the producers we didn't want them to come, which was, you can imagine that conversation with a producer at Good Morning America, who are used to rah, 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 hey, we're gonna be on TV and see millions of people and et cetera. We had a very difficult conversation with producers of that show that we essentially said, we don't want you, we don't need you. We understand that we're not gonna back you out of this right now, but we're gonna help craft the story. And what we did in that program, if people did see it, is that we crafted a story, worked tirelessly with the producers of that show to create a vision of Whitefish, of responsible recreation, of taking care of the place. We want visitors who come here to take care of the place and be part of our community. So there's a lot of ignorance surrounding promotion of Whitefish, because we, for a lot of reasons, are obviously in reaction mode due to COVID, due to a lot of things, but we're not at all promoting Whitefish, and ever in the summertime, absolutely. We don't ever host any type of traditional press trips any longer. Years ago, when Whitefish did need to fill in more, and we still need, you'll hear from others, we still do need to fill in the shoulder season a little bit. The occupancy rates will surprise you in terms of the number of beds that are being slept in during the slow months. And we owe it to Whitefish business people to create a year-round place where we don't have to lay off workers in the off-season like we used to do. All we focus on right now is sustainability. We are not promoting Whitefish. There's a ton of complex issues that wrap into this, and I don't need to get into that right now. If we don't shape the image of Whitefish and tell our story, other people will do that for us, and that's what we're concentrated on. Again, tremendously difficult time for communications in terms of responsible recreation. Our Friend of the Fish campaign, honestly, has been a tremendous success. We have visitors on the ground that are learning more about our community values and what we expect from visitors. So the management side of things right now is the focus. Either we define who we are and what we stand for, or other people will do it for us. We did offer a meeting with Ms. Schuber. She decided she did not want to meet with us and talk about, the efforts that we're making. And I find that difficult, just because there's a lot of misunderstandings about what we're doing as a town. And so that confuses me just in terms of the tone. Doors are always open for constructive conversations. I really value a tone of positivity, spirit of cooperation. Tourism is a big leg of this town. It's not the only leg, and we don't want it to be the only leg. But there's a lot of work to be done, and let's keep working on it together. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Glad you showed up tonight to share those comments. Rhonda.
Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. I've been in business, the lodging business, for 34 years in Whitefish. I do operate a small inn. And 15 years ago, I was involved in the formation of the Whitefish Convention and Visitor Bureau and participated in the conversations around the tourism assessment. We identified many local businesses, got together, and made a business decision to band together to find ways to improve the economy for us in Whitefish during the lean off-season months. It's extremely difficult to run a business when all your customers show up in July and August. Whitefish doesn't want to be a single-season gateway town that's hollowed out and abandoned the rest of the year. And so we, as business people, wanted to find a way to have a more even customer base throughout the year to enable us to have year-round employees, to employ ourselves year-round, et cetera. The assessment, the tourism assessment, was created to stabilize our economy in the slow fall, winter, and spring months. Many different funding ideas were considered, and local businesses all agreed on the voluntary assessment as the best method to generate the funds to help stabilize the economy in the slower months. It's a voluntary assessment. The businesses voluntarily participate, and anyone who wishes can have that assessment taken off their bill. It's voluntary. And as you know, you do not approve that budget. It's a business group's decision to try to improve their businesses. Nationally, to be viable, a hotel expects around a 70% occupancy as an annual average. That's kind of the basic metric. In Whitefish, the yearly average for hotel occupancy has for many years hovered between 50 and 55%. So we're all operating at quite a significant handicap. And you know how busy it is in July and August, so imagine how slow it is in those other 8 months. October through May we just get by. The Whitefish Visitor Bureau programs balance the economic and community sustainability while working hard to maintain the integrity of our town and the quality of life for local residents. We need to continue to be careful not to become that hollowed out one-season gateway town. If we're truly going to be a sustainable community, we need consistent year-round jobs to keep families employed. The CVB does not promote summer travel. And let me say that again, does not promote summer travel. But there are a lot of other people in the community who do, developers, realtors, et cetera. It does not encourage out-of-state visitors to relocate in any way. We never take any relocation advertising or promotion, and that was from day one, no relocation information. The CVB is trying to spread out that big spike in the summer visitors by encouraging them to come any other time of the year so that we can keep our local stores, our restaurants, our hotels, and other businesses open and viable. Because tourism is one leg on that stool. Maybe there's a three-legged stool, maybe it's two, I don't know. We want to keep a balance. And you can become part of the solution. Suggest to your friends and family that they visit at other times of the year besides July and August. That would be a good start. We figure about between 500 and 1,000 non-resident visitors are visiting friends and family in July every day. There are 130 member businesses of the CVB, and of those, 53 are collecting the tourism assessment. And it has been very successful in funding programs like the Friend of the Fish, the crisis communication in partnership with the city, and a lot of other things. We have a grant program for local community events. And the grant, there was a small grant made for the Christmas decorations to expand them around Depot Park, that kind of thing. So in a way, some of that assessment does go to those things, which I think a restaurant person thought, which is correct. Brian said, and I just want to reiterate, that if we don't control the story of who we are, other people are more than happy to from outside. And it's very important that we be able to reach out to journalists and others who would frame who we are and what we are in a way that isn't consistent with our community values. And that's work the CVB has undertaken and been quite successful at, but needs to continue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rhonda.
Good
Didn't
evening.
recognize you with your mask on.
Right, and not in black sweatshirt. Mariah Joes, 716 Spruce Court. I'm coming to you today as a citizen, a business owner, a member of the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan Committee, and the incoming board chair of the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, also known as Explore Whitefish. As a business owner and resident, I am feeling the same pressures as the rest of my neighbors. The tight housing market affects my ability to staff and run my business. As a consumer, I am also frustrated with the number of people in town and how hard it is to patronize the rest of our local businesses. We feel inundated and invaded, oftentimes outnumbered. But the situation we are in right now is not a single cause. When our community leaders of decades past were working on ways to transition our economy away from timber and the railroad, could they have imagined a global pandemic or how Airbnb could upend our real estate market? Explore Whitefish is actively working on adapting to this new landscape. Our board was an early supporter of the STMP, and our organization is growing from its original mission of a destination marketing to destination stewardship. And what does that mean? Well, we haven't advertised Whitefish in the summer since 2010. We do shape the messages that visitors see when they are here. We actively encourage visitors to appreciate and respect our home, just as we do. Moving forward, we will continue to shift to stronger messages of land stewardship and low-impact visitation. Just as we did not get here overnight, this is not a single silver bullet that will fix the issue. But I believe that this is a situation where our community shines brightest. I believe that through community involvement and decisions that prioritize the common good, we can be the community that lives to see the other side. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Before we go to remote comments, are there any further comments from the audience? Michelle.
thank you. Mr. Glunk, if you'd like to unmute your mic, please state your name and address.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Michael Glunk and I own 1238 2nd Street as well as 35 Columbia Avenue. And I wanted to comment very quickly on affordable housing, specifically garage apartments and ADUs. I've had a goal now for many years to build a garage apartment on the back of my property at 1238 2nd Street. And I've discussed this for many years with my property manager of that property. I would also like to do the same at 35 Columbia Avenue. But the reality is, the current City of Whitefish law indicates that there's a lack of desire for additional housing, which I find interesting considering the need for housing. So if there truly is a housing need, then I personally feel like there's no reason why this law deed restricting the long-term rentals of garage apartments, if you live in the primary residence, if you don't live in the primary residence, should exist in Whitefish. In fact, it's my opinion that the law should just be removed, but anyone with a pre-existing deed restriction should be allowed to eliminate the restriction from their deed to allow these individuals to build additional housing inventory. I know for me personally, if and when this happens, we're looking to build as soon as possible. However, I won't be doing that until this is removed. Not because I don't want to, but again, because the City of Whitefish's laws state that they don't need additional housing inventory. And so just wanted to kind of share those thoughts from an outside perspective with regards to how those laws are currently interpreted and how they're affecting the housing inventory and availability within the Whitefish market. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Michael. And I think that's all from our remote audience. We'll move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is communications from volunteer boards. Dylan, I believe you're here this evening on behalf of the CVB to present the Friend of the Fish campaign update and status report. Welcome.
Thank you. Just give me a second here. I'll plug in my
Sure.
computer.
Take your time.
Great. There we are. Good evening, Mayor Mulfeld and City Council. Thanks so much for your time. I'm just going to give you all just a quick update on our Friend of the Fish campaign and just add some of the numbers that we have so far in terms of what we've done here on the ground this summer with the first year of our summer visitor education. As you all know, the Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Plan was approved by the Whitefish City Council in September of 2020, with one of the first recommended action items to us, the Whitefish CVB, being charged with a summer outreach campaign to visitors on the ground. And that is what we have been working on here for obviously the last few months. A couple of versions and things that we're working on with that: distribution of print collateral, as you can see, the Be a Friend of the Fish checklist, as well as some digital ads on the ground. So some Facebook ads with some videos featuring our STMP committee members, talking about our base of our community values for the Friend of the Fish campaign, as well as some static Facebook ads, and then streaming Spotify radio spots as well, featuring Mayor John Mulfeld and our Olympian Maggie Voisin, hometown hero. Our community values for the Friend of the Fish also are on the banners. There's 50 of those right now that are still up, I believe, through mid-October, which are on Highway 93 west from State Park over to Caro, as well as over on 3rd and Spokane and at the library parking lot as well. And I do want to mention that some of that was paid for through a nice grant program. It's called the Record Responsibly Grant that we received from the Montana Office of Tourism and Business Development in Helena. So it was really great of them to provide some extra funding for this project. Just some quick numbers for you from a current campaign perspective. For digital, right now, those numbers are from mid-June when we started the campaign. They did run until August 15th, so they ran through yesterday, but these numbers are just through July. I will have the final recap here in about a month. As far as those Facebook ads, we had over 293,000 impressions, and that is just for visitors that were here on the ground. Obviously, people can see that multiple times, but it's good to keep reinforcing that message, which is really important. Spotify had over 43,200 impressions. As far as our print distribution of the Be the Friend of the Fish collateral, we distributed 9,000 Friend of the Fish checklists and information cards, and obviously those banners are up right now. Just a quick website number for you that I think is important. For June and July, we had 63,000 users to the website with over 115,000 page views. Those are double-digit increases from last summer, and why this is important is because the Friend of the Fish is prominently displayed as the first thing that you see on the homepage of Explore Whitefish. So for us, it's just another way to get this message out to more people, with the majority of those users here on the ground when we look at where that traffic is coming from. So just another great way that we're getting that information out. As was mentioned during public comment, the grant program, the new cycle is open as of August 1st. Applications are due October 1st for that. Eligible for that are Explore Whitefish member businesses as well as Montana nonprofits. This is the 4th year we've done the grant program. We've awarded 8 projects in that, including last year. The program that was granted funds was Glacier Nordic Club to help retrofit some of the lighting for the lit Nordic runs at night, and so that will be installed before ski season this year. So just another great community asset for all of us. And when you include the funds that we're going to be providing out this year for that program, we'll have awarded $30,500 through those projects. And just a quick snapshot for you all on booking pacing for the next month for short-term rentals. We all obviously have had a busy summer. We all know that. When we look at kind of the curve here, it still follows our typical trend where we have a busy August and then we start tapering off into September there. So when we first kind of look at, those first 2 weeks or so of August, so everything on the left of that red line there, August 18th to 28th, the average is 76% occupancy, and then August 29th to September 15th, the average is 56%. So this is a weekly report that I'm putting in our weekly newsletter. So hopefully you guys are seeing some of that too, and our businesses have said this is really helpful for them just to get an idea of kind of the peaks and valleys, especially as we move into to the shoulder seasons where things become a bit more variable from an occupancy point of view. Thank you all so much for your time. I know you have a busy meeting. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan tonight? Steve?
I just have one, Dylan. Is anybody else in the country doing this kind of messaging around their vacation towns? Do you know?
Yeah,
I
actually,
models.
Yeah, I see it all over the place. It's almost become a best practice, and if you're not doing it, then you're behind the curve, to be totally honest with you. But yeah, there's quite a few examples. Colorado Mountain Towns, Mammoth Lakes is doing something very similar, and of course all over, in Montana as well. Some of that came from the nice boost from the Recreate Responsibly grant, so all of the regions and CBBs in the state are also doing this, but other mountain towns similar to us, it's absolutely become a critical best practice to get this message out and to continue to reinforce it as well.
Further questions? Thanks, Dylan.
Great, thank you all.
Appreciate your hard work. Any volunteer board reports from the council tonight? Ben?
Mr. Mayor, I would offer a brief update from the Housing Steering Committee. At this month's meeting, the committee did greenlight a proposal pertaining to ADUs or accessory dwelling units that will loosen certain restrictions in exchange for asking the owner to support our long-term housing goals. So I look forward to seeing that proposal come here soon. Next month's meeting will be focused on prioritizing of some of the remaining items. We just got a big one off the plate with the ADUs, so it'll be an interesting discussion if anybody would like to join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Further board reports? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and move on to item 5, which is our consent agenda. You have the minutes from the August 2nd, 2021 regular session, which includes our one ordinance as well. Any edits or additions, Rebecca? Or a motion, please?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Into your mic, please, if you don't mind.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hannan. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Michelle, which brings us on to our public hearings this evening. We'll start with item 6A, which is consideration of a request from Eagle Enterprises LLC for a conditional use permit to 3 additions to the existing Chrysler service building and Chevrolet building. The shop is located at 6219 Highway 93 South, and the property is zoned WB2, which is our secondary business district. Wendy.
All right, we'll see if this thing works here. It was working earlier. So again, this request before you is a conditional use permit to construct 3 additions to the Chrysler dealership. One is to the south and will enclose the existing covered drop-off area, which is 3,000 square feet. One to the west would expand the showroom for a total of 1,980 square feet. And then they're also proposing a 3rd addition that would join the dealership building and the body shop together, which is 2,820 for a total of 7,800 square feet. The total square footage of the building once all the additions are made will be over 52,000. This is the 3rd building expansion request in the past 2 years. You'll recall in 2019, the council approved a 2,250 square foot addition of the body shop. And then in January of 2020, the council approved a 6,815 square foot addition to the service area. So a CUP is required because the building exceeds 10,000 square feet, and it's also required because in the WB2, they were recently updated to require automobile sales and service as a conditional use permit, and this is an expansion of that. So again, the property is a little more than 8 acres. It's located at 6219 Highway 93 South. It's currently developed with the car dealerships and accessory uses. It's surrounded by commercial uses with residential to the east. The property is zoned WB2 and has a general commercial land use designation. The project is served by all public services and facilities. We noticed adjacent landowners. We posted a sign on the property, emailed advisory agencies, and published a legal in the paper. We're going to unplug it and plug it back in again, I guess.
Sometimes works.
Sometimes it doesn't work, yeah. We did receive a letter from the Homeowners Association to the east who was not in support of our recommended condition to add a sidewalk along Shiloh. We do review conditional use permits according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. It does comply with the growth policy because it's zone WB2 and it promotes the purpose and intent of that zoning district. There's adequate land area, all setbacks appear to be met. The fire department reviewed the plans and did not have any concerns. They're able to meet all the parking requirements. They're required to have 153 spaces, and the site plan shows 188. I need to re-sign it. As noted on the site plan, there's adequate parking on the property. Many of the employees do park along the roadway on the west side of Shiloh Avenue. There's also some unpaved parking areas near the north entrance onto Shiloh. And this area either needs to be paved or some measures need to be put in place to prevent parking on the unpaved surfaces. This was brought up at the last conditional use permit that you folks looked at, and so some of the areas were paved, but there is still a little bit of unpaved area. The engineering standards for stormwater require professionally designed stormwater plans when the cumulative amount of impervious area exceeds 10,000 square feet. These enclosures are either areas that are paved already or have roofs. So the project falls under the redevelopment and engineering standards, which requires projects to comply with the BR3 water quality treatment. However, this property has an existing stormwater facility and it serves a portion of the site which is functioning properly and is being maintained. So the Public Works Department considers the existing water quality treatment devices adequate to meet the engineering standards. The property is located on Highway 93, JP, and Shiloh. Wraps around this property. All streets are publicly owned and maintained. Currently, Shiloh Avenue is a dead end along the north, which serves the backside of commercial uses that front on Highway 93. It is intended to be a major north-south road, as you folks know, and probably heard from Hillary just a little bit ago with the Highway 93 corridor plan, similar to the plan for Baker Avenue. Currently the street is signed for no parking on the east side of Shiloh, but there is parking permitted on the west side, and that's a recent change that you folks have made. Vehicles do park on that west side of Shiloh Avenue. A second access was recently added onto Shiloh. The existing frontage of Shiloh Avenue is just a paved street with curb and gutter. There's no sidewalk. There are street lights or no street trees. As such, the increase in the usage and the access onto Shiloh Avenue requires the final completion of frontage improvements along this portion of Shiloh Avenue. So we have recommended that as a condition of approval to install sidewalks, boulevards, and street trees along this frontage. This will make a safer pedestrian environment for Shiloh Avenue for the Donkey employees and the general public. So we are recommending a condition of approval that the owner work with the Public Works Department to determine the proper sidewalk and boulevard widths, and the Parks Department to determine the proper street tree installation and spacing. With this addition, we didn't require a TIS, and then the proposed addition under structural bulks, massing, and scale will expand the existing footprint by about 7,800 square feet. The addition will comply with the maximum building height and zoning and will be required to go to architectural review, and they look at massing, bulk, and scale. The neighborhood is a mixture of commercial and residential uses. So the planning board did hold a public hearing back in July on the 15th. The applicant and his representatives spoke at the hearing. They were not in support of the requirement to install the sidewalk along Shiloh Avenue. The planning board did unanimously recommend approval, including the sidewalk condition. And those are attached in the transmittal letter to you. So just a couple of conditions to take note. The unpaved parking area that's in the back either needs to be paved or they need to be blocked in a manner to prevent parking in that area. And then install frontage improvements along Shiloh Avenue from JP to the north property line. Frontage improvements will include at a minimum sidewalk, boulevard, and street trees. And we'd ask that the applicant coordinate with Public Works for these improvements and coordinate with the Parks Department on street tree species and location installation. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So we don't know how wide that sidewalk would be. Yeah.
I'll let Craig describe what the standard is.
Yeah, the engineering standards would
describe that sidewalk as being 5 feet wide, so
Okay.
5-foot concrete sidewalk.
Will they have to remove that white fence, Craig?
The intention would be to build the sidewalk and boulevard between the curb and the fence, so
Okay, the fence will remain then?
anticipate the fence is right along the property line, and these improvements would be in the right-of-way.
Okay. And then the neighbors had a concern about adding trees between Ariel Way and Shiloh. Were we planning that already?
I know that there was a comment made at the planning board meeting from Tom Kennelly from the neighboring HOA opposing the sidewalk. I don't recall what he mentioned about trees, but
It was just at the very bottom of their homeowner's letter. They said it would be really nice if we could have trees here. So I thought I'd bring it up just to make sure we put it in if we can. It's kind of more down towards 3/4 of the way down or towards the end.
Yeah, I don't know if, maybe Maria could tell you what the plan is for trees along JP Road, Maria, between Ariel and Shiloh.
All right, well, we don't have to do it
There
now.
isn't a plan at this time to put in more trees. But if an individual property owner wanted to do an adopt a tree, we would be willing to work with them on an adopt a tree program. That's the program that people would be able to get more trees.
So the homeowners could approach the parks,
Yeah.
and our tree people would help them plant it, and then they could sponsor it for 3 years and water it. We water it, and then,
Correct.
okay, thank
Yep.
you. That's all I have, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further questions for Wendy? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6A of our agenda, and we'll hold that public hearing now. I do see that Aaron Wallace is the applicant's representative on the project, and Kevin's also here with us tonight, so if you guys have anything additional to add to Wendy's staff report, name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Aaron Wallace, 265 Hawks Lake Lane, Whitefish. The principal architect for Montana Creative and assisting on this project. So I just want to kind of clarify a couple quick things on the building and the project we're planning on doing. So 2 of the additions that we're planning on doing is underneath the existing roofs. One is the service department drop-off area space. So we're just enclosing that area so it's a warm environment for people to drop off their cars for servicing. And the second is to take kind of the existing outside store or showroom space that's underneath the existing canopy and close that area and provide a little bit more retail space and a new layout that Chrysler/Jeep is promoting to us to do for an interior renovation also. And as part of that, we lose all of our office space or a bunch of our office space in that. And so what we're looking at doing is then expanding out between the existing building and the body shop. It won't actually be connected to the buildings. We just can't do that. It'll be a slight separation, but that way we can get some more office space and that we've lost in the rest of it. So we actually don't anticipate that at this point they're hiring or engaging any more employees. This is just kind of create a little bit more retail space and better experience for the customers overall. As part of this, we also kind of need to upgrade the exterior facade a little bit for the newer look of the Chrysler/Jeep program. We will go through architectural review and work with them on making sure that we have a compliant building that they're acceptable with, just like what we've done with Chevrolet and Subaru before. So the big question related to the building or the project itself was a little surprise that kind of came with us looking at expanding that sidewalk along the backside of Shiloh there. As Wendy so pointed out, we've been here quite a bit for this building and property, and so to kind of get that thrown at this point was a surprise. And I think there's just a few things that kind of we feel about it. First off, there hasn't really been any sort of safety or traffic incidents at this point currently without the sidewalk, with the employees parking on that side. They're able to get up on the grass and then walk towards that entrance area. There is the fence that's required along that edge, and that kind of creates a little bit of a visual buffer as people are exiting the property off on that side, and we worry about people's safety if they're on that sidewalk walking up there. Another part of it is that, as this is outlined, it's a sidewalk that ends now. It's not connected to anything at the end of our property. There's Wright's Furniture, and then there's also the newer dealership up on the north side of that property, which wasn't held to this condition of putting a sidewalk in along Shiloh there when they came through just a few months ago. So we wonder about a sidewalk where somebody has to walk up and either then at the end of it cross back or come back again through the same kind of concerns we have with safety in front of that traffic lane, which does have quite a bit of traffic coming out from our property towards the east there. So there's our concerns. We're not in support of that condition. We think it would be better kind of left as is, and if the whole street gets developed in the future, certainly would be a part of that, but we just don't see a sidewalks ending at a dead-end location as serving anybody's needs at this point, considering there is one on the other side. So if you have any questions related to the project or anything else, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron on the site design? Not seeing any. Thanks.
Great.
Kevin, you have anything to add?
Kevin Kaltschmidt, 150 West Emerald Drive in Whitefish. You guys probably already read everything from before, and we already got a good explanation of the project, so I won't take very long. But yeah, just the overall, the whole reason for this is just creating a more functional space for our customers and for us, and then making the visual appeal better. So, you know, we were talking about right before the planning board meeting last month, they had the corridor plan for segment B, and two of those things were improving the visual character and providing higher wages and salaries, which this would help both of those things. So, yeah, so I don't really have a whole lot more to add because I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. But anyway, thank you guys for everything that you do. We really appreciate your service. So.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Public testimony this evening on this item. Any public comment? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion, preferably. Steve.
I move that we approve WCUP 21-12, the findings of fact in the staff report and the conditions of approval as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board, with one possible exception.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Steve, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, at the planning board meeting, the only concern we had, and we talked about it for quite a while, was the sidewalk. And I thought it would be better to do cash in lieu, but I went along with the board's decision to install the sidewalk as it was, just because cash in lieu seemed to make more sense since they've been through here a couple times. Maybe they'd rather just build the sidewalk, I don't know. But they've been through a couple times, and we haven't caught them on this. We haven't done the sidewalk thing until this application. We also approved a CUP on the other end of that, property without having a sidewalk consideration. So, anyway, the plans are straightforward. The thing that's tripping me up is the sidewalk, but I'm willing to approve it as it is, with the possible exception of asking for cash in lieu instead of building the sidewalk at this time.
But your motion implies constructing the sidewalk per the condition of approval. Okay. Frank.
Mayor, can I ask staff a question? Is there a reason that we want this constructed now as opposed to when it has someplace to go, when we have development on that street that's going to allow the rest of that sidewalk to be built out? I mean, it's a pay me now, pay me later kind of a routine. I kind of get that. But is there a reason that we think it needs to be constructed at this particular moment on this basis? Or if it's developed in the future, are they going to be assessed for the construction of that sidewalk?
Craig's probably better to answer this. Our cash in lieu fund doesn't go to specific sidewalks, it goes to regions, so we don't really know which sidewalks are going to be built in that area where that fund goes, but I think Public Works were the ones that wanted to see this sidewalk.
Yeah, I think in terms of, past CUPs that have come through on this project, we really felt like with each CUP that's been approved, there's been additional use of the site and additional employees and additional use of the parking on Shiloh. And staff does witness on a daily basis employees that would use, or people that park on that sidewalk or on that roadway that would clearly use, hopefully they don't park on the sidewalk, that would clearly use that sidewalk. I think our biggest concern is during the winter months when the roadway is restricted, that area is used for snow storage, and clearly people are not walking between the fence and the curb during the winter months when there is snow, and walking in the street creates another hazard. Of course, pedestrians do have the option of walking on the existing sidewalk on the east side of the road, but I can tell you right now that doesn't happen very often. So it just felt like a cumulative process that we realized we didn't catch it in previous CUPs, but it was, should I kind of say, the straw that broke the camel's back on this one. We felt like we had hit that trigger where it should be required and it will be used immediately. In terms of the project on the north side of Shiloh, there wasn't any additional construction proposed as part of that CUP. It was simply a CUP that was put in place to reinstate an existing building use, and so we didn't feel that it triggered any type of sidewalk construction. We anticipate there will be a future project that comes forward on that property, and that will likely trigger the sidewalk. So at that point, there could potentially be sort of a gap in the middle between that sidewalk and this potential sidewalk, and that is where we typically see those cash in lieu funds being used, you know, to kind of bridge a gap or create some connectivity that wouldn't otherwise be created.
Craig, thank you.
Further questions for staff? Rebecca?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing a lot of growth down there, and we are anticipating another subdivision that's gonna come in, and I think when we can get our transportation plan moving, we should take advantage of it. So I think it's safer to have sidewalks down there. I drove down there and looked through it, and I drove through Wright's Furniture parking lot, and so I think it's all going to transition with a lot more people down there, so I'd rather we kept it in at this point.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments on the motion? I did see vehicles parking on the bike path in front of Jalisco Restaurant earlier this summer. That was a new one for me. So on that note, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Aaron. Have a good evening. We'll move on to item 6B of the agenda, which is Ordinance 21-12, an ordinance rezoning approximately 1.93 acres of land located at 1625 Highway 93 West in Section 35, Township 31 North, Range 22 West in Flathead County, Montana, from the county's R3, which is their one-family residential, to our WR1, which is our one-family residential district equivalent. Wendy.
All right, so this is one of those simple annexation rezones. Again, it is zone county WR3, and our equivalent is the WR1, our one-family residential district. You folks annexed this property into the city on June 7th. The WR3 is a 10,000 square foot minimum lot size, just like our WR1. Again, the property is at 1625 Highway 93 West, almost across the street from where State Park comes into the highway. The land use designation is suburban residential, which corresponds to the WCR, WER, and the WSR. The property is surrounded by residential uses and the golf course to the north is served by all public services and facilities. We noticed adjacent landowners, legal notice, and all that good stuff, and we didn't receive any comments. Again, the land use designation is suburban residential, which is consistent with our half-acre, acre, and 2.5-acre zone, and the WR1 is consistent with our urban land use designation. City cannot downzone a property as part of annexation rezone, and we've taken the policy to do the most like zone, and so that's why this one is proposed to be WR1. I think all the other findings have been met, and so staff is recommending approval. Planning board held a public hearing back in July, and they also recommended approval.
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Not seeing any. Thanks. We did have advertised for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 21-12. Any public testimony this evening? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead. Were you here to speak? Okay, just checking. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion, please. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve WZC 21-02 and the findings of fact in the staff report as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board on July 15th, 2021.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. That brings us on to Resolution 21-24, a resolution amending our 2021 fiscal year annual budget to increase appropriations in 2 funds of the city. Dana.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today you have in front of you a resolution that would amend our fiscal year 21 budget. There were 2 funds that we experienced overages in, both due to contracts that were approved by the City Council, so we knew that these would be coming down the pipeline. The first was the Tax Increment Fund. We did have additional costs anticipated for the Baker Avenue Underpass project, and that contract was awarded prior to July 15th of 2020. We need to increase that budget about $45,000. We do have the funds available for that, so it'd be covered by unbudgeted revenue, so we received more revenue than anticipated. The Solid Waste Fund is in a similar situation. We recently, the City Council approved a contract with Republic Services that started in April of 2021, where the city would start billing for garbage services once again. And therefore, the Republic Services now bills the city directly for all customers in Whitefish, and then Whitefish turns around and bills each individual customer. So we are billed one bill in which we do have to pay to Republic Services, and that did cause that fund to go over budget about $250,000. And we have, what you will see in the fiscal year 22 budget is a significant increase in that fund to accommodate that contract. We just had not anticipated it for fiscal year 21 when that budget was approved. So with those 2 changes, staff does recommend that the City Council approve the proposed resolution amending the fiscal year 2021 annual budget.
Thank you, Dana. Any questions for Dana on this item? Steve?
Seems like a lot of money. Was it a revolving amount of money we were supposed to be getting, we were supposed to be paying Republic Services, or?
So that would be for, I think, 3 months worth of expenditures, but we are also collecting more than that because we collect what Republic charges plus our administrative fee on top. So we have all of the revenue and cash to make those payments to Republic Services.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just a moving.
It's big. It's because we hadn't anticipated that in the budget. We didn't really know what that would look like.
Okay.
Although when we approved the contract for them, we absolutely had to pay those bills.
Okay, so it's not like we're over budget.
It's not over, it's unbudgeted expenditures.
Gotcha, okay.
Technically over budget, but just unbudgeted and anticipated expenditures.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Further questions for Dana? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on Resolution 21-24. Any public comment tonight? Not seeing any. I will go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve Resolution 21-24, a resolution amending the 2021 fiscal year annual budget to increase appropriation in 2 funds of the city.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign. And that motion carries unanimously as well. We'll move on to item 6D of our agenda, which is our FY22 budget, tax levy and assessment public hearing. We're going to go ahead and hold one public hearing on what will be Resolution 21-25, which is the actual municipal budget for the city of Whitefish for the upcoming fiscal year, but also for Resolutions 21-26 all the way through 21-35, all related to the budget adoption this evening. If you're okay with that, Dana, we'll just hold one public hearing.
That sounds great.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, tonight I have the pleasure of proposing to you the final fiscal year 22 budget. I'm going to touch on some highlighted items that are of significance, some that are changes from the preliminary budget, but also just some reminders for those in attendance this evening. So the fiscal year 22 budget, one thing to keep in mind is that for consistency and clarity in our budget presentation, we have moved to a fund balance approach for the general fund and special revenue funds, and a working capital approach for our enterprise funds, which is our water, wastewater, and solid waste funds. In using that to determine a beginning balance, we have most funds that have seen only minor differences, but those that had larger receivables, such as our fire and ambulance fund, our water fund, and our sewer fund, the beginning balances are now including an accounts receivable of roughly $350,000 each. Surprisingly, they're all around a similar amount. So that will be one change that you'll see within this budget this year. The Montana Department of Revenue completes a reappraisal of all taxable property every 2 years. This year, for fiscal year 22, it is a reappraisal year, so the city's taxable value now includes market value adjustments as of December 31st, 2020, as well as the addition of newly taxable property. These factors that we have, which included the increasing sales price as well as the booming building environment, have resulted in a 17.49% increase in our taxable value compared to last year. While the city is seeing the significant growth in taxable value, we know that this ongoing pandemic, affordable housing, many members of our community are still facing financial struggles. This budget was originally proposed to continue the 10 mil decrease that was provided last year for fiscal year 21, and all maintenance assessments remaining flat. And that would be the second year that those assessments have been held steady. An additional reduction of 14.165 mils is also budgeted this year for fiscal year 22, which accounts for additional property tax relief that we've received from resort tax collections, the transition of the funding from the Flathead Emergency Communications Center from each individual jurisdiction to a county-wide assessment, and to minimize the financial impacts from the extreme taxable value growth, we wanted to keep taxes low. The total mills levy, that is about 93.47 mills, those are going to generate about 2.03% new revenue in property taxes. But it's really unique this year because what we've done is the 24 voted fire and ambulance mill that was voted by taxpayers, we allowed that fund to keep the entire increase of those mills, the 17.49%, as well as the library fund keeping their 6.8 mills at the 17.49%, and offset that with the general fund seeing a reduction in property tax revenue of $129,000, or roughly 4%. So while the city is collecting 2% more, our general fund is actually seeing a decrease. And we have plenty of reasons why, and we'll get to why we're keeping those funds there. Just to touch back on resort tax, since I did mention the additional property tax relief, we collected $4.8 million in fiscal year 21. That is over the exceeded budget, which was $4.25 million for fiscal year 21. Anytime we have amounts in excess of the budgeted revenue for resort tax, that must be given back as additional property tax relief. So the property tax relief for fiscal year 22 is $482,000 more than last year and $271,000 more than fiscal year 20. So resort tax really killed it this year. Total property tax relief for fiscal year 22 is about $1.67 million that will be returning to our property taxpayers. That represents a 35 mil decrease. During public health crisis like we're facing now and continue to face, maybe it's an economic downturn around the corner, we're not quite sure, having reserves is extremely important to continue to maintain our essential services. Residents rely on the city to provide anything from fire to police services to water and sewer, and those cannot, cannot just stop offering those services if we're facing a financial crisis. So I'm happy to report that the budgeted fund balance, and remember we're at fund balance, not cash balance as we've done in the past, we are up at 39.85% of our total budgeted expenditures. That has increased from the 21.95% last year. Again, there's three reasons. One is the presentation to a fund balance approach with that $350,000 in fire and ambulance fund. But also the CARES Act, when we received about $1.88 million for wages for our police and firefighters that was already budgeted to be covered by other revenue. That was a cash windfall that we were able to utilize to increase reserves. And then also fund balances have just, they've started the year off higher than anticipated. You'll see in the changes spreadsheet that based on what we had assumed and where we ended up was about $5 million difference, close to $6 million of additional fund balance we had. Overall, the fund balances of our property tax supported funds are going to be at acceptable levels, even with the spend down budgeted. So we are still budgeting a spend down in cash balance, but these are for one-time capital purchases or known retirement payments. And we are sitting in a very solid financial position to weather any upcoming recession that could occur or economic downturn. One of the things to also keep in mind with the reserves that we have available is that strategies such as providing impact fee reimbursements, that would come from your general fund, and with the solid reserves we have in that fund, during the fiscal year, if council so chooses, we could always do a budget amendment to support that program without actually having to do that $4 million increase that we had talked about earlier in the year. So I do feel that we do have some funds available to continue our affordable housing strategies, even though it's not necessarily listed in here. Capital improvement spending, we obviously see those fluctuate every few years, every year really, but right now what we're seeing is a decrease of about 15.1 million, and that is due to the water and wastewater treatment plant projects mostly being complete in fiscal year 21. We're wrapping those up in fiscal year 22, so much smaller amount is going out the door with those projects this year compared to last year. City personnel, we again have a CPI increase of 1.5%, and with our taxable value increase of 17.49%, the formula for pay increases would equal a 3.5% pay increase for most city employees, and that's a 1.5% cost of living adjustment and a 2% step, which is an equivalent of a longevity step, or longevity pay. There are some other increases to pay based on collective bargaining agreements that are detailed in my budget transmittal letter. We are adding 3.375 FTEs to the city with this budget, including a building department administrator, administrative assistant, additional hours in our utility department, bringing one position to full-time from working 35 hours a week to full-time, 2 fire department employees who would be 40-hour work weeks, which we have already hired, and they've actually filled because we had early approval, and we've filled both those positions. You'll see my manager's report. We've listed our new team members there. They have already backfilled 2 open 24-hour shift positions, as we had discussed. Then we also added about 0.25 of an FTE to the library for their continued demand increases. And not included in the 3.375 FTE is a new wastewater treatment plant operator. Now that one we've been able to have savings from just a reorg of the city where we've promoted our utilities operations supervisor to the role of assistant public works director. One thing to keep in mind is the American Rescue Plan. I'm sure you continue to hear that. We will continue to talk about it. There's a few things to note on here. We did, and you'll see that on the changes spreadsheet, we did update that amount as an amount that will be received of about $2.1 million. We also have in there budgeted amounts for a minimum allocation grant and a competitive state grant. through the American Rescue Plan that the state received. Unfortunately, we just got the rankings back from the state today. The governor did a press release. We were ranked 115 out of many applications. They had applications totaling $850 million from cities in Montana and entities in Montana for $250 million that they actually had available. So if anything, that goes to show that infrastructure is still a needed area. But while we did not receive the competitive portion, that's approximately 2.45 million of the 3.9 million, we do have our minimum allocation grant we should receive, which will be able to effectively match the 1 million we had for cast iron water main improvements to help us address Spokane Avenue, where we know we have some serious water main repeated issues with leaks. So that was good and bad news. I mean, we will still have some additional funding, which is great. And as the Senate just passed an infrastructure bill, we'll keep our eye out and see what happens as it goes through, or next steps as it goes through. Okay. Don't get me off track here. I'm not going to go over all the little details about where we are expenditures. If you're interested, you can definitely look at the budget on percentage-wise where we are compared to last year. But I can tell you that this is a balanced budget. We've been able to address areas such as fund balance reserves, cash funding, capital projects, and we've been able to start to address the issue of our what I'll say unfunded personnel liabilities outstanding. Instead of having to do vacancy savings, we're actually able to plan for retirements. We're planned to have holiday accruals capped, and we will work, finance department and I will work together to come up with a plan for assigning some of those larger fund balances in those funds like fire and police for these personnel costs. Right now, 50% of the personnel liabilities for fire and police are both roughly $300,000, and that's just 50%, not the full 100%. Granted, you would never see all employees leave at once, but it's good to have those set aside. As presented, the budget will support the city's endeavor to continue to provide exceptional services to our community, adjust to growth and demand, and improve our facilities while keeping our property taxes and assessments at a minimum. A home that sees the average 17.49% increase in value will have a tax increase of about 1.31%. So with that, I'd like to thank Director Dahlman and all of the department directors for their time on preparing this year's budget. And I think it's one that we can all be proud of. And I appreciate your review as well, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dana. Any questions for Dana on her staff report or the budget for that matter? Rebecca, then I'll go to Steve.
Yeah, Dana, so you said that our reserves are almost 40%? That's amazing.
In property tax supported funds.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then, and that we actually now have, we got 2 full-time firefighters, but people in the community were still worried that we needed more, but now we have 2 more half-times?
So the 2 additional are already the 2 that we hired. So we've only added 2. So we had 15 and now we'll have 17. And 2 of the 17 will be 40-hour work weeks to start.
Okay, so there's still, people still think we need more fire help, but
sure,
we know that. Okay, yeah, great job. It was, I don't know how you make it interesting, but I appreciate you, the way you present it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Steve.
What was our goal for cash reserves?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, in the past, we've had a cash reserve goal of 25%. Fund balance, you know, this is a little bit different. It's not going to be a readily available cash when you have a fund balance approach. But that said, we are much higher than before. So again, like I said, I think those initiatives like affordable housing, this is where we can start to address, you know, where do we initially fund these projects. Legally, state laws, you can have up to 50% of your annual total appropriations. That percent of 40% doesn't include any transfers or whatnot, but it would be total appropriations in the general fund, actually. So
Okay, so it's a little bit of, we changed the way we do the accounting and a little bit of the property tax, the new property tax revenues that's jumping it from 21% to
Yeah, the
40%.
new property tax revenue is $85,000, so that's really not budging that percentage much. A lot of it has to do with the fund balance and the CARES Act funding that we received.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Further questions for Dana? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on, again, what will be Resolution 21-25, which is our actual budget, plus Resolutions 21-26 to 21-35. Any public testimony this evening on these items? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion to that effect, please.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve the fiscal year 22 budget resolutions 21-25 to 21-35.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion?
Not much, Dana. I'd like to say thank you to you for putting this thing together and getting it to us in such a timely manner. This was, again, as all budgets are, this was hard for different reasons this year, but know that I think we all understand how difficult it is and how good you are at it. So thank you so much.
Further comments? Rebecca? Microphone, please, Rebecca.
If it's possible in the future to add a hazard bonus for our employees, I just think it's important to acknowledge how hard they work to get us through the pandemic at this point, especially with high visitor volumes. Just an idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle. Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Ben, as well. We will move on to item 7A of our agenda, which is Resolution 21-36, authorizing the transfer of approximately 0.03 acres of Whitefish Lookout Road right-of-way in exchange for the extension of an existing CMP. Craig.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think we can make this one pretty brief. So the owners of Lot 46 of Iron Horse are in the process of designing a single-family home on their property and discovered a culvert that impacts the building envelope of the parcel. The parcel is also encumbered by a steep slope that has further complicated their design process. The owners have approached the city with a proposal to relocate the existing culvert to a location that will alleviate any drainage issues on their property. In exchange for doing so, they would like the city to transfer to them 3/100ths of an acre of Whitefish Lookout Road. This equates to roughly 1,500 square feet of property. Doing so will allow them to situate their proposed home approximately 15 feet further up the slope, taking advantage of a more gradual topography at the foot of the slope. We've had similar proposals before for Whitefish Lookout Road, which is described as a county roadway on the existing plat of Iron Horse Phase 2. However, Flathead County is of the opinion that the city of Whitefish took ownership of this road as an operation of law when the land was annexed. While the city may own the right-of-way, the road has never been maintained by the city, and we don't anticipate any point in the future where the city will maintain that roadway. Montana Code Annotated does provide counsel to discontinue a street or any part of a street if it can be done without detriment to the public interest upon written petition of landowners on the street or adjacent to the vacation. However, since this request is only to transfer a small portion of the right-of-way, just the small triangular portion shown in your packet, we determined it could be more easily accomplished through a quitclaim deed. So the enclosed resolution that you have will allow the city to proceed with that quitclaim deed, and the attached agreement will require the owners to take care of the relocation of the culvert. I've gone through this proposal and I don't see any financial requirements or impacts to the city. In doing so, I think will alleviate us of a couple $1,000s worth of culvert relocation costs. So staff has reviewed this petition and determined it will not be detrimental to the public interest to transfer 0.03 acres of Whitefish Lookout Road, and we respectfully request that council approve Resolution 21-36.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig on the report? Steve?
Looking at the map, how does this culvert impact their building envelope?
So where the culvert discharges, the way that the slope runs, it'll essentially run right into where they propose to build their house. The way that we've addressed these situations in the past, not necessarily in Iron Horse, but in other areas where we have culverts that discharge onto a private property, is we'll relocate the culvert so that it is not detrimental to the property. So it's really about a 20 or 30 foot extension of the culvert that'll get it further down the hill, so it drains down to the lower road.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see the topography before, so
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
pretty steep.
Thanks, Steve. Further questions, or can I have a motion, please? Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve Resolution 2136, a resolution authorizing the transfer of approximately .03 acres of Whitefish Lookout Road's right-of-way in exchange for an extension of an existing culvert.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle, thanks, Craig. And we'll move on to item 8A of our agenda. We'll hear from Ben Dahlman, our Finance Director, and we will review and possibly adopt the FY 2022 to FY 2026 Capital Improvement Program. Ben, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Malfeld and City Council. It's my pleasure to present to you the Capital Improvement Program, but before I do, I would like to thank my fellow directors for their preparation in the budget and in the Capital Improvement Program, which I'm presenting here tonight, and for Dana's help in preparing the budget and helping with the CIP and giving me a lot of instruction and knowledge and skills that make Whitefish what it is and help us develop these budget documents and the CIP documents. So appreciate all of their help.
Thank you, Ben.
The Capital Improvement Program is a 5-year program. The current year of the Capital Improvement Program was adopted as part of the fiscal year 22 budget, but it continues for future budget years as a plan, and it goes to fiscal year 2026. It is a recommendation of the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, as a good planning document. It's also required by state law here in the state of Montana and by our city code. So we are fulfilling our obligations in that regard. I'll point out that on page 4 of our 22-page CIP document, it summarizes 133 projects totaling $42.1 million. And most of those projects happen to be in the Water Fund and also in the Resort Tax Projects Fund. There are dollar amounts in other city funds as well, highlighted on the summary page. The notable projects that we're continuing are the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and in the Resort Tax Fund in particular, which totals $11.4 million, includes projects for Edgewood, Texas, Armory from 2nd to Dodger and East 5th Street and Caro Avenue. Those are the primary projects in the CIP. Again, this is a planning document for years beyond the current fiscal year, and it is proposed and recommended to be approved as a plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. The detail surrounding each fund can be found in the subsequent pages.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Any questions for Ben on the CIP? Pretty straightforward. We see this every year. How about a motion? Steve?
I move that we adopt the fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2026 Capital Improvement Plan.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously as well. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to item 9A of the agenda. You have Dana's written report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Dana on her manager's report? Dana, anything additional to add tonight?
I have just a couple things.
Okay.
The task force COVID-19 Task Force meeting is scheduled for this Thursday at 5:30. We're going to do it via WebEx. That information will be posted on the front door for those that want to attend. We're really going to just reconsider what kind of messaging we can to, what messaging, if any, needs to be done to support our hospitals, businesses, and schools during this resurgence of COVID. With the COVID topic comes the mask topic. The school district school district board did make a determination to have masks required for kindergarten through 6th grade. That appears to have some protests planned revolving that, but I will say that Bridger and his team are prepared to ensure the safety of all parties and to ensure that the protest remains peaceful. That is planned, I believe, for outside City Hall. We've managed plenty of protests outside City Hall, and we're well adept at preparing for those. So if you have any concerns, you can reach out to Bridger directly. Also, I wanted to bring to your attention, so the American Rescue Plan dollars were allocated to each town based on population for those that were not a entitlement city like Great Falls, Missoula, and I can't remember the other one's Billings. What happened though was the town of Browning has ceased to exist as a town, and they had included Browning in the allocation. So we actually will be receiving an additional $3,186 that would have been Browning's allocation. The city of Livingston and their council actually chose to take that whatever their portion was, it was close to $3,000, and return it to a nonprofit in Browning. They basically used general fund dollars and said, you know what, we'll take the ARPA funds, we'll do what we need to with the ARPA funds, but we're going to take some of our general fund dollars and we're going to give that back to the community of Browning in the sense that, you know, they're a community as well. My understanding is the water and sewer services that the town of Browning originally had were obtained by the Blackfeet tribe. And so I was wondering if council is interested in us looking at whether, you know, and I can do some research, whether we look at a nonprofit. The city of Livingston chose a nonprofit that was focused on youth and substance abuse and recovery in those type of situations. But even looking at returning the funds to maybe the tribe who does operate the water and sewer, I think could also be appropriate, and in giving them, basically we'd be donating general fund dollars to them in an equivalent of what that ARPA match is. It shows that, you know, we're all a community together, and just because you're not considered a town anymore doesn't mean that you shouldn't have your allocation of dollars to support your community. They are our neighbors, and so if you guys are interested, I'd be happy to do more research and report back at the next council meeting.
I'm seeing head nods. Just a quick question. How did they become not a town anymore?
Well, financially, they weren't managed properly, and so I can tell you from my audits, I audited them back in 2011, and it just been a growing problem, and I believe they determined that financially the town wasn't operating well, and it would be best to turn those, turn the infrastructure and everything over to the tribe to operate. So I believe they basically went bankrupt.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks, Dana.
Yep.
Anything further tonight?
Nope, that's all.
We'll move on to item 10. You have 2 letters enclosed with the packet. Items 10A, the 1 letter from Michael Glunk, who you heard from earlier this morning, or this evening, excuse me. Any comments on Michael's letter? I do have a comment. Michael, I know you're on the phone, and I know your intentions may be well in your letter, but I took your email a bit offensive, and quite frankly, it was offensive. Everyone up at this dais has worked for years on affordable housing, and to indicate in a letter to us that we don't acknowledge that we have a workforce and affordable housing problem here in town is it's just ignorant. And maybe you can treat your elected officials like that in Colorado, but up here it's not acceptable. So again, we're working on the issue. We're going to continue to work on the issue, but it would be nice if we had constructive criticism and feedback from our folks that visit and live here, rather than the tone in which your email was delivered. So I'd appreciate that in the future. With that said, you have another letter, item 10B of the agenda, from Palouette Mormino regarding the Eagle Lake property. Any comments on that letter tonight? Ben.
I was just I didn't realize we had short-term rentals in that part of town. I was wondering if staff could perhaps just clarify the history of that project, if they know it.
So when that project was initially approved, short-term rentals were permitted in that WB2 zone. There just weren't any. That zoning district allowed, all types of, different types of stays, hotels, motels, and/or short-term rentals. And so subsequently, the council directed staff to amend that to remove short-term rentals from the WB2. However, before that was removed, that project was approved with short-term rentals. And so.
When was that approved?
It was approved, it's been approved several times. It came back for an additional approval, I think, probably 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I think it was, a little more than 18 months or something like that. But yeah, they were vested in there, and they pulled their building permit, got their engineering and everything. So they are vested for short-term rentals.
Sorry, Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I think because we're in an emergency with our housing, we're seeing a lot of people that are trying to come up with solutions, but they assume that we haven't been working on it, or they have a self-interest with their solutions. And so sometimes it's hard to hear the criticism. I think we've made really good progress lately in coming up with a number of different ideas for the issues that we're dealing with in the community. But, we have to hear all recommendations, but I agree with John. We really need constructive ideas, not a lot of criticism, because we know it's an emergency. And the only question I had from Paulette was, when did that detention pond, which is a natural lake, become Eagle Lake? And I was wondering, I think we named it ourselves, and after going through the renaming of Lost Loon, do we need to actually officially name that? Or, because it seems like it came up when the Marriott was going to go in there because there was an eagle nesting there, and that's when the name got assigned to that lake. But I don't know that we actually have.
It's always been a stormwater retention pond.
Yeah, but now it's
never
called
really had a
Eagle.
name, and I think that when that project came in, they just sort of dubbed it that informally. And
But now we're calling it, oh, you mean that's?
it's the name of that development that's on there.
Okay, but we're
they
not
called it
calling it Eagle Lake because it.
I mean, I don't think there's an
doesn't look-
official map anywhere that has that name on it.
Okay, that's what I got confused, because I thought all of a sudden we as a city were calling that detention pond Eagle Lake, and I thought, that seems a little strange. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't vote for that when it came through. I felt like it was too dense, but it looks like a nice design. We can't really do anything about it at this point. It's already been approved. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Steve.
We don't have any plans to remove the fencing around that detention pond, do we?
Remove any of the fencing. The water feature itself is entirely on private property.
Okay.
And although the bulk of it is owned by the project currently known as Eagle Lake, I don't anticipate any of the fencing will be removed. I know there has been a proposal by the developer to have a dock on that water feature, which the city is trying to discourage. But at this point, there isn't any plan by the city to do any improvements on that water body.
So we don't have rules about fencing around detention ponds, things like that?
No, there actually are rules regarding fencing around detention ponds. Yep.
Okay, so is it a detention pond, or is it natural, or what is it?
I believe it existed before it was used for stormwater management, but currently the vast amount of the water that enters that is through stormwater management.
So what does that mean? Is it a detention pond, or is it?
It's a stormwater pond.
Okay.
For all intents, it's been
Can you
turned
run-
into a stormwater pond. I believe it was always there, but a previous development used it as a stormwater pond, and it's been, additional projects since then have also used it.
So do we have rules about fencing around stormwater ponds?
Yes.
Okay. And so they'd have to follow those rules?
They have to follow the rules, correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think that is identified in our Whitefish area stormwater utility plan as a fallout facility, if I'm not mistaken. We'll move on to councilor comments, and why don't we start on this end tonight? And Frank, any ending comments this evening?
I've probably been out of turn a couple of times tonight, and if I have been, I apologize. A couple of thoughts. Since we're on the budget and we're talking a little bit about taxes, and I don't expect a response from staff tonight, but I'd just like to throw a couple of things out. It occurs to me that one of the things or the problems that we have is with the influx of our visitors, and some of that's driven by non-residential owners who visit us on cyclical basis, and also the facilities that are used for short-term rentals. It seems to me, and I don't know whether we can under state law, but at least I'd like to throw this out to us to think about, is there a way for us to think about whether or not the non-residential facilities, non-residentially owned facilities, home facilities, single-family facilities I'm talking about, could be taxed at a higher or different rate, or add an additional tax applied to them for non-residential or for non-year-round, non-resident ownership. And the same would apply for VRBOs, and use those tax funds to support an affordable housing program, which, quite frankly, is needed to support them. So I think there's some equity, if that's a possibility, but I just throw that out there for us as to consider is, okay, how do we fund an affordable housing program? How do we put that responsibility on, for lack of a better description, the facilities that are driving our need and our inability, quite frankly, to provide affordable housing otherwise. So again, I throw that out to us to think about as something that, okay, we haven't tried a lot of things, but maybe that's something we could do. So anyway, if staff had a chance to take a look at that or get back to me, I'd sure appreciate it. So thank you. That's all I've got tonight, John.
I could tell you right now that that's something, obviously we've looked at, because Hawaii, I believe, does that. It's regulated by the state, and so we would have to go through the state legislature to have them allow us to tax non-residents at a higher rate. Actually, we talked to Senator Tester about that, being that that was an option, but we would have to get that through our legislature, which I think will be an uphill battle. But that said, I don't think that that stops us from looking at our business license fee for short-term rentals, and also tacking on the cost burden that it's causing for the city to have to address affordable housing. So what is $150 right now as a business license annually could go up significantly to address our affordable housing challenges that we know are impacted by short-term rentals. So again, not property tax, but I think through our fee system, business licenses, we could do something similar.
Okay, and just one other thing, John, I'll say, I will take it upon myself to contact Dave Fern and see if there's any way we could move something like that forward. I think the people in Bozeman, I think the people in Missoula, I think there are a number of communities that would appreciate and would participate in supporting something like that. Maybe there's some traction we can get. So thanks. Okay.
Frank, not to interrupt you, but I have had that conversation with Dave, not in depth, but I have talked to him about it.
Okay,
so
great.
The bug has been put in his ear.
Okay.
Thanks, Frank. Ryan?
Nothing for me.
Thank you, Ryan. Steve?
Just a little follow-up question. Is there a way to add some sort of assessment to our short-term rentals, resort residential areas, a special assessment on top of like the bed tax or whatever?
I don't think so, because there's not an infrastructure that we're trying to maintain. So when you look at our street maintenance or our lighting maintenance districts, that's when we can do an assessment. Unless we had housing we were trying to maintain ourselves, and again, we can't do that. I don't think that an assessment would be the way to do it. I think we're gonna be forced to look at the fees when it comes to business, building, no, wow, sorry, not building permits, business license fees.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into, I do drive my car occasionally around town in the summertime, and the roads have taken a beating this summer. So, anyway, think about that. That is an infrastructure that we are trying to maintain, and it's been, the roads are in bad shape. And then I just had a question for Craig. A while ago, we said we were going to make Skiles one way, or past City Beach, it was going to be one way and up and over the hill, and that, haven't seen that happen yet.
It's kind of embarrassing to tell you this, but we can't get paint. And that project just doesn't work without being able to mark the road properly.
Okay.
We do have the traffic candles and the signage, but we just weren't comfortable doing it without striping the road, and we don't have the paint to do it. So we kind of internally made the decision that we were going to wait until next season to do it. We anticipate that we'll get the paint that we ordered back in April, sometime this fall, and so we'll be staged and ready to do it so that we can do a better educational campaign and not just spring it on people in September.
Okay, thanks. The only other comment is thank you for all the hard work you put into the budget this year, everyone. Really appreciate it. It's been a tough year, but look how much money we have. Goodness gracious.
Thanks, Steve. Ben?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback a little bit on some of the comments from some of my other counselors here about how to ask the visitation economy to help pay for our housing problem. And I've mentioned this up here before, but I do think that there is, it'll never pay for everything to fix housing, but I do think that there should be a permanent source of funding coming from the city towards housing initiatives somewhere. And in my mind, I think a chief cause of the problem is the visitation economy, and I think there should be some mechanism in here that we can take some funding from that and help pay for the problem for the constituents in our community. And I think these are interesting ideas. I think there's other ideas out there. There's linkage, for example, or I was like, can we, have part of the bed tax or something, or, and I don't know. I feel like this council should find a solution. I mean, I would be very much in favor of just asking the question of staff, what do we do? How can we do this? Because I think that, we have a lot of work to do to establish how the funding gets used and all that, but we'll get there. But I think it's a fair question to me. What are we going to do? What do we do? So I'd put that out there. The second comment I would have is actually about that project, and I think it's related, but that project, Eagle Lake or Detention Pond or whatever, is a great example of, I think, part of the problems we have here. I mean, there is that lot, that area is right next to other long-term rental apartment buildings. If this short-term rental project was not being built on this lot, it would be long-term housing. It just would be. And so, I think it's very important. I don't think there's anything we do about this now, but it just goes to show, I think the kind of development we're getting is not the kind of development we need here in town. And we're getting more $1 million short-term rental condos because that's where all the money is. And I think we need to make very sure we control it as best we can, because otherwise we're losing all our housing. And this is just a microcosm example of why, just to pick on this project. But anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Rebecca?
I have some questions. First off, for Chief Couch, thank you for stepping up early. And I just wanted to review for the public what the public's legal responsibility is in terms of not threatening elected officials and how we handle that in the city, since that's happening to some of the school board. And I just think the public should know we don't allow that. There's even laws against it, but I wanted to have you speak to that if you could.
Yeah, for sure. I think with the vote last Thursday's raised some concerns, and the board members were kind of shocked from some of the fallout from that. You know, we've been working with the school district, reference those communications, and we look at each communication or each threat or perceived threat individually, and would conduct investigation on that matter to determine whether or not a threat was made and if it violates, you know, Montana law or a city ordinance, those type of things. So that's how we address those type of things. It is a case-by-case basis. Every situation's different. There's not something we can look at just to throw it all into one lump sum. I encourage anybody that feels that they've been threatened to contact the police department, to file a report. We'll take a look at that. We'll do a thorough investigation, our officers will, and then we'll forward it to our legal team and see where we're at with Montana code and city ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just want to remind the public, we have a really amazing process called the public process. And that means every single person gets a chance to influence our outcome in the future. And so part of that process means you respect the people that went to the bother of running for office. Like the school board is entirely volunteer, we're entirely volunteer. We have, I don't know how many boards, 36 boards. Everybody's volunteering their time. The staff is amazing, but part of the process of living in a democracy is you learn to work through the contentious issues with respect for the process. And that means respecting the people that are doing the hard work of making the decisions. And so I would like people to tone it down and be respectful of the people that are making really hard decisions for the community. Okay, second, thank you, Bridger. Thanks a lot. And then I have had people ask me about a litter ordinance because people are really tired of picking up garbage in town after other people. So I was wondering if you guys feel like that's something that we could pursue. I'm really tired of picking up masks, and just people have left a lot of litter over the last 2 years. So, and then another person brought up an idling ordinance, which happens in other resort towns, and it's posted on the signs. So it's not just at the school, but you can't just have your car idling and causing air pollution. Okay, so I'll put these on the table. You guys are all tired, I can tell. Okay, and then, well, just to mention this, there was sewage smell again, Craig and Dana. I drove by there just to see how bad it was. It wasn't terrible, but it was a good day. And so I didn't know what to tell the people at Trailview, like when that would be resolved. So I thought, I just mentioned by next spring, those ponds might have the lime on top of them, and then we would be getting rid of the residue, but I wasn't sure if that was accurate.
Hey, Craig, you want to give an update?
Yeah, feel free in the future just to refer those questions to the city. We did mail a letter to several hundred people that own property around the wastewater treatment plant, updating them on the project, updating them on the new plant and the operation and the decommissioning of the ponds. I very much anticipate that this will be taken care of before next spring, but we're working really hard right now to make sure that the new plant is up and running and meeting all of our permit requirements, and we'll be focusing our attention this fall on the decommissioning of the existing ponds. I don't have a set date when I can say we're going to turn this off, but I can tell you it's a concern, and we're working really hard on it, and we're making sure that the plans we're putting together for the decommissioning of the old lagoons will have odor control at the highest priority.
Okay, so you're thinking by next spring, summer, it will be better?
Correct.
Okay. I just told them I would follow up on that. And then the last thing is the CDC 2 weeks ago had urged Americans to mask up in congregate settings because the Delta variant is much more contagious and more damaging in the body once it's in there. And I'm the only one masked up here. And so I'm just wondering when you feel like we should get to that again. And Steve, but I mean, I feel like we should be doing more as a community, setting an example of what the CDC is calling for at this point in our society. So, you guys are tired, but I still think we should be masking. So nobody gets sick, because even if you're vaccinated, you can be a carrier of the Delta variant, much more affecting children this time through. So I know the governor and the legislature restricted our ability to set laws, but we can still set an example.
We discussed that earlier, Dana and I, in a meeting before the work session, and as she mentioned, they're reconvening the COVID task force this Thursday, I believe at 5:30 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, Dana. And Dana and I also discussed what type of outreach and education we need to start focusing on, if any. So we'll be working on that and circle back with the council. Or when we get to it, yes, yep, as soon as possible. Thanks, Rebecca. Anything further from staff? I have nothing further this evening. Craig?
Sorry, real quick update. I think everybody's well aware that we have restarted the Edgewood reconstruction project. We learned a couple weeks ago that the water main that we had ordered was on its way, and so we did start construction again last week. Edgewood is currently closed between Texas and Colorado. We have a posted detour in place. There have been some concerns raised from local residents about use of streets within the detour. We do have the detour currently posted as Colorado and Texas up to Denver. What we do when we design detours for roadways is we use like streets for like streets. So the existing detour of Edgewood, which is a collector roadway, uses other collector roadways. We're not preventing vehicles from dispersing within the neighborhoods, but we are recommending through signage vehicles to use that detour. So this is no different than other detours we've done for other projects in the past. We've monitored it. We're closely evaluating it, and at this point, I'm not recommending any additional signage. I think it's working well, and I'll continue to keep council updated on it.
Great. Thanks, Craig. I have nothing further with that. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.